When is the right time to start investing in real estate? Are you too young? Are you too old? Do you have enough money? Did you already miss the market timing and all the good deals are gone? I totally get it. Investing in a rental property is a huge decision for your financial future, but also for your lifestyle. You want to make sure you're in the right place, not just from a financial perspective, but for all those other factors in your life as well. Today, we're talking about this with two other expert investors. What's up, everyone? I'm Dave Meyer, head of real estate investing at BiggerPockets, and I've been buying rental properties for more than 15 years. Today on the show, we're talking about when to invest in real estate. We're going to get into when is the best age to start, when you have enough money in the bank to take down your first property, how your lifestyle at different points might affect whether you want to start investing, and if there are times in the economic cycle that are better to dive in, and whether or not there's times that you should probably hold out. So for this conversation, I've brought in two great investors who have wrestled with all of these questions themselves. We've got Henry Washington here.
Hey, what's up, buddy? Glad to be here. Thank you.
And we also have Jonathan Greene, who's been on the show several times. He's an agent and investor based in New Jersey. He's been one of the most prolific posters in BiggerPockets forums history, and he also hosts his own podcast, Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. Henry, good to be with you guys.
Let's start our conversation about when to invest, talking about age and like what the right time to invest is, because it seems like every social media influencer is like 18 years old now, and everyone's talking about how you have to do it immediately out of like middle school.
Property pros.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jonathan, you sort of like grew up in real estate, right?
Yeah.
I remember that about your story. So do you recommend to people starting as soon as they can?
I think it depends what type of mentorship you have. You know, I was fortunate because my dad literally would not stop talking about real estate from the time I was a baby on. Like, it was just real estate money, dirty joke, real estate money. So that was fortunate.
Wait, was I your dad?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, this show's going off the rails. But I mean, like, you know, you can't fault people for not investing at 18 if they don't have the right background, because then I think they will look for that, you know, TikTok influencer instead. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really about when you feel confident and how you get to that confidence level. And a lot of that is who you surround yourself with, not just what you watch, because what you watch is one thing, but then what makes you take action is another.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And you are lucky. I think very few people have that, but be able to get all that inspiration and advice about real estate while hearing dirty jokes, I mean, it just sounds like the absolute ideal child.
I mean, Henry is a great dad.
Well, Henry, you know, despite raising Jonathan, you started a little bit later in your life, right? But not that late.
Yeah, 37, I believe.
Do you think when you started was ideal, or do you think there is a better time?
When I started was ideal for me, because I think investing, you need to have a certain level of maturity, right? Because it's a big deal. And I think you can start young, but I think the question is less about age and more about financial stability or financial readiness. I don't think any college student, unless their parents are giving them money, is financially stable. But some are more ready than others to invest because some may have some amount of savings. Some may be from a family who's going to help them, buy that first property, right? Everybody's financial position and situation is different. Do I wish I would have bought a duplex and house hacked as a college student? Heck
sure.
Yeah. Of
Me
course. Too. But was I in a position to do that when I was in college? I probably wasn't. If you can start young, you should. But I think you have to look long and hard about what does can and ready mean for you. Like, you've already got to go to school, which is hard enough. Mm-hmm. You don't want to put yourself into a position where you're defaulting on a property because it didn't go like you thought. You're not renting out the unit. You're not getting the rent you thought. Your tenants are destroying your place, and you're trying to cover this expensive mortgage and go to school. Like, if it goes well, it's great, but it cannot go well. And are you prepared for that?
That's a really good way of putting it. I think that, of course, everyone's going to say, yeah, just invest as early as possible because the benefit of compounding is real. But also, the younger you invest, the odds of you messing up, I think, are actually a bit higher.
Yeah, I was stupid. I should not have owned a property. I should never have owned a property at that time. So, yeah.
But I think Henry made a good point about maturity, because even if you're financially ready, if you're immature, you're not going to do well with the money. So it's not just about what you know about real estate, it's what you know about money. And if you're self-aware of what you're going to do with your money.
Do you think that maturity then requires, Jonathan, some amount of financial literacy and education before actually pulling the trigger?
For sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
We always talk about real estate, but money is really the sidecar to what moves it. We need the money to get there. So if you look at kind of more like what we were saying in the beginning, we see on social media and more FIRE movement, it's like trying to get people to go quicker. But you want to build a foundation. If you don't have a foundation, you're just a house of cards. And that's why so many people crumble and give up. I find that the people who have become successful over time were ready, like Henry said. It doesn't matter if they were 20, 30, they built enough runways so that they knew, hey, I can do this. And if it doesn't go well, I'm going to be okay. I think that's what's really important, because there's inherent some risk in all real estate. We're lucky to live in America where most things are going to appreciate, but you can make bad buys. But as long as you know, if this doesn't go well, I'm not going to collapse my life and go bankrupt and ruin my finances for 7 years. I think that's hugely important.
I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of people, I feel, get caught up in this idea of risk tolerance. And they're like, oh, I'm comfortable gambling. I'm comfortable taking risk. I'm in.
Until they get punched in the mouth.
There's a difference between risk tolerance and what I think Jonathan's talking about, which is what I would call risk capacity, which is like, are you in a position to be able to weather the storm that's appropriate to your risk? And for a lot of people, that means having maybe a stable job. That's something I cared about before I started making an investment, or having an emergency fund, or, if you have a significant other who has a stable job and healthcare and benefits. Like, those are the types of things that allow you to take risk to go out there. I think about my own self, my own risk capacity. I started when I was, 23. And I had risk capacity because I had nothing to lose. I had nothing, And so I do think there's something to that my time was worth nothing. It was either playing video games or go out and invest in real estate, because I wasn't giving anything up. By doing it. And so I think there is some element of that, when you are really young, that you have less to wager in a way where you can just kind of hustle. But I think for, if you're starting, a little bit later, if you have a family or significant other, you really do need to put those other things in place before you start just investing.
You read my mind, because I was going to go to that same place. But I think being more mature and having something to lose or something to mess up should force you to be more cautious. And I remember when I started investing, with my limited knowledge of investing, I still made sure that what I was buying, if I had to get out of it, I could get out of it and even make money. I wasn't going to buy something that I felt like I couldn't just get myself out of that situation because I had too much at stake. And it forced me to research to the point where I felt comfortable enough. And had I not had something to lose, I probably would have just jumped off the cliff and bought something, and who knows, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, especially now with technology being so prevalent, they're suffering from not getting enough reps, so they don't really have the confidence. So when they get the FOMO, they just transact. But someone that says, "Oh, I looked at 10 properties this week," and I ask, "Well, how many did you actually look at?" And they say 0. It's you just don't have the experience to be buying. I, of course, was over fortunate, walked hundreds and hundreds of properties before I was even 18. That's lucky for me. I don't think people can accumulate that number of looks, but you need to get a lot of looks so you can really feel more comfortable with knowing what's in a basement or understanding what's in an attic. We're saying risk tolerance and risk adjustment, but it really comes from how much you know and who you're working with. If you work with a baby agent and you don't know a lot, how protected are you? You go in, because look, real estate agents are great. I am one. We all know a million of them, but your regular real estate agent isn't savvy with investors. So they don't really understand what a new house hacker is doing, but the ones that do can really help work together and teach along the way. And I think, both of those are important to going and picking the right time, like you guys were saying.
Hey, so I know people say real estate investing is passive, but Let's get real. Chasing rents, drowning in receipts, and getting buried in spreadsheets feels anything but passive. If you're tired of losing all your valuable hours on financial busy work, I found a solution that will transform your business. It's Baselane, a trusted BiggerPockets Pro partner. Baselane is an all-in-one platform that can help you automate the day-to-day. It automates your rent collection and uses AI-powered bookkeeping to auto-tag transactions for instant cash flow visibility and reporting. Plus, they have tons of other features like recurring payments, multi-user access, and free wires to save you more time and money. Spend less time managing your money and more time growing your portfolio. Ready to automate the busy work and get back to investing? Baselane is giving BiggerPockets listeners an exclusive $100 bonus when you sign up at baselane.com/BP. The other thing I think, Jonathan, sort of that you had mentioned earlier, it's just like seeing these people on Instagram is what I would think a false sense of confidence. People go out and they're talking about, oh, I just bought this deal, and they're, showing off all these amazing parts of their lifestyle. I think a healthy fear of the investments that you make is super important. I'm scared every deal I do.
I still get scared when I put a property
every time, right?
Yes,
you're like,
every time.
Why did I do that? Like, I'm so excited that day, and then the next morning, I'm like, what did I do?
Yes. I literally had a deal earlier in the year where I made the offer, and the lady said yes, and I went,
Well, but your experience. So the thing with the brand new person who doesn't have the reps, when they get that oh man feeling, like they should get it because they start going through every scenario. Did I bid too much? We know we didn't bid too much. We know the values, but the new person immediately. That's why so many deals fail for new investors and then create havoc in the relationship with realtors, because they really do. They get the oh moment, but they have no idea. If maybe they are 100,000 too high, they just don't know because they're not advised and don't have the confidence.
I remember the first off-market offer I made on a property, and boy, I'm glad they said no.
Yeah. You offered too high?
Way too much. Way too much. It was way too far out of town. I offered way too much. And my inexperience it could have really bit me in the butt had they said yes. I'm sure nobody would have gave me money for that deal because they'd have been like, no, we're not financing that.
There's some checks and balances.
The inexperience will show itself, right? Like, so it truly does matter.
I mean, I wonder what the right amount of reps is. Like, what is the right balance if you had to come up with that? Because I think what we're realizing here is that it's not about age. It's about coming up with the right balance of risk tolerance, financial literacy, and reps. Like, Jonathan, do you have a rule of thumb or estimate for the audience of what they should expect?
If you're buying single family, I think you should see at least 20. Like, I would be no less than 20, just because, if you're in a basement area, that's where all the problems are, the foundation, walking the outside. And people who are too new that they don't even want to get an agent, just go to open house on the dumps in the area if you're looking to flip. No one's preventing you. Sure, you're going to get on a lot of realtors' lists, but that's why I think a lot of investors should have their license, not so they can transact and do their, represent themselves, because you don't want as a lawyer to represent yourself, but just so you can go see every dump that comes on the market. It's so important to just be able, Henry, you have a great agent. You can call them and say, hey, let me see this. But a lot of people don't. So I think you got to use open houses, because you could get 6 on a weekend. That's 6 reps already. You're ahead of half the market.
I was actually doing that this weekend. I was just going for reps to learn my new market.
Yeah,
and I wanted to buy something because I just found something that was great. But I was not intending even to do that. I was just, I went from stuff that was 500 grand. I went to stuff that was 1.5 million. That was stabilized, stuff that was in the worst possible shape. Some were ADU development opportunities. Just go see them. And you'll get a sense of what makes sense to you. And I think you get a feel for value. And I don't know how else to describe that, because comps are important, but when you do it enough, you can feel what the value is and if you're getting a good deal or not.
Yeah.
I would say I probably didn't feel comfortable walking a house on my own and estimating a rehab. Probably for 6 months into me looking at houses. And that's still a loose level of comfortability.
I still can't do that.
Yeah, right.
But I don't really flip. So I'm not a rehab person.
I can, but I still always think I'm missing something. So I think the more experience you get, we're, people like Henry, we're putting in there's overage. I know that I need 15K for stuff behind the walls and stuff that's going to come. And new people don't. And one thing we were talking about before that I think is important, like just having enough money, but it's also having enough knowledge to know, like, wait, I need reserves. There's so many people who are like, I can afford 200, so I'm going to spend 200. And then you're like, but wait, you have to do repairs, or you're buying a multifamily and you have tenants, you have to do upkeep. Like, reserves are the thing. So when people say, oh, I have 100 to burn, you don't have 100, minus 15%, keep that for reserves and make sure that you're safe, because that's what boxes people out. Like Henry said in the beginning, you're just, when you push yourself to the limit, you're just making it impossible for you to succeed.
Well, we've talked a lot about when the right time to invest is, about risk capacity. Now we've hit a little bit on financial literacy, getting your reps in. But I also want to talk about lifestyle, because this is sort of a really important part of being a real estate investor, is like how it fits into your greater life and your family and your other aspirations and hobbies. Jonathan, you grew up with this. Like, have you had to fit real estate into your life, or has it just always been sort of part of your life, so that's not as much of a consideration for you?
It was, but because my dad was an attorney and I started as an attorney, I never thought of myself as a real estate investor. I just was someone who was being smart with money. Like a lot of old schoolers that I've talked to, it was just, I've always wanted to have multiple streams of income. That's why I invested in stocks. I just like to have things that produce. But I think as I got older, I realized, wait a minute, if I want to do a flip, I'm signing up for a second job. Do I have the time when I'm working 100 hours for the government to sign up for another job? The answer is no. So I flip much slowly, and I've never been a high volume flipper because I never was really full time in just investing. And I think that's, again, what's important for people to say. You're saying, I mean, what time does it take? If you want to be an investor, you have another job, and then do you have a family? Is your family going to be mad? Do you want to be spending Saturday and Sunday unclogging toilets? I don't. I wanted to be with my kids. So I think it's really, choosing lifestyle is about your family, how you want to live, and all of that.
Well, you're supposed to get your kids to unclog the toilets.
Yeah. I mean, when they're 5, you got to bribe them with like I got bribed. My dad was smart. He bribed me with a video game. If you come pick up the rent, we'll get a video game. I'm like, okay.
Sold.
Yeah.
Deal.
Done.
Yeah,
No problem.
absolutely.
And he always came through. So, I mean, but that is a good way to teach though along the way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Henry, did you have kids when you first started?
No, I did not.
Okay. So do you think that made it a little easier?
Yeah, it was easier before I got started, only because there was, less considerations I would need to make. I was married when I got started, but my wife's been all in, since day one. And so it was much easier. I think what really changed when I had kids was my wife's level of involvement. She used to go with me to look at houses and make offers. And now there's probably some family thing that she has to do with the kids if I'm doing that. And so that's changed. Like, you do have to adapt your lifestyle to what you're doing. I went all in from day one. Like, I really took on the identity of a real estate investor from beginning. I put a lot of weight on becoming a successful real estate investor because I didn't want to have a plan B. Like, I just wanted to figure out how this worked. And I had a flexible enough lifestyle. I learned how to fit in the work that I needed to do. I think a lot of new investors get scared because they think, okay, well, how am I going to find the time to do this? Which is what I thought too. But once I actually started to market for deals off market, answer the calls, go on the appointments, and I was even managing my own properties, I quickly realized what activities actually took chunks of time, and then where I could fit those activities in during my day. And the rest of the things I realized I could probably just have a spreadsheet or some sort of process or system to take care of. So yeah, you're probably going to be underwater at first, but then I quickly realized, I'm like, okay, this doesn't take a ton of time. I spend most of my time either analyzing the deals when they come in, going to the appointments and making the offers, and then selecting tenants. Like, those are the time-consuming activities. So I would figure out when I could do those things. I would either do them at my lunch break during my day job, right after work, like on my way home from work is when I would go on appointments. That way, when I got home, I could just be with my wife. And if I couldn't fit it into those time frames, then I probably wouldn't see that house or do that thing. Like, that was the time boundaries I had to make.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the whole key, right? You can really invest with almost any amount of time. When you're first getting started, you probably need a little bit more time, but you could just adjust your strategy and what you're trying to do based on your own time commitment. In the past, my rule has been like 20 hours a month for real estate. And that's all I want to commit because I've been mostly a passive investor. I'm interested in trying to do some more active things. So I'm like consciously changing that. But I do really think about that all the time, that like, here's my priorities in life. Like my relationships with friends, family, my wife. I have hobbies that I want to. I have a full-time job. So like, what amount of time can I give to this and sort of crafting the strategy? It's probably 5 to 10 hours a week, I would say, like when you're first getting started is like a good rule of thumb. And if you can't do that, like it's maybe not the right time for you to at least get started. And if you want to scale down, you do that enough to get your first deal. I think then that's possible, but you do need, I think 5 to 10 hours a week is a good idea.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, it's really about how you prioritize the things and realizing that you can't outsource your top priorities. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things you can outsource over time, but in the beginning, you can't outsource someone to learn for you or get reps for you or rely on everybody to do everything for you, because that just makes you a bad investment. You're a passive participant in an active asset, which is a disaster.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Because oftentimes when I hear, when is a good time to invest, people are typically asking me because they're trying to figure out like when they should invest from like a financial readiness position. Some people feel like they need to pay down all of their debt before they invest. Some people feel like they need to have a certain credit score before they invest. Like, I have an opinion about paying down debt and credit and things, but like what do you guys think in terms of like financial readiness?
The problem is, I think if you're not by the numbers financially ready, you're likely to get into a rabbit hole of, buy with no money down, which of course is possible, or getting into sub 2. Both are great options, but also not that realistic for someone who doesn't have experience. So you could spend a lot of time doing that. I think it's important to have your credit as high as possible, but that's why you go to a lender early on in the process when you're looking and say, how do I look? What is my student loan debt like? What's my DTI like? How's everything looking? And then get an overview to see, well, if I have to put 40% down because things don't look good, that's just not going to work for me now. Right. And if you overthink it before you even talk to a lender to know where you qualify, you may be spending all this time when you're, a year and a half from being ready.
I wrote about this in one of my books. I can't even remember, but I think it's Start With Strategy, about this exact idea, Henry, because I think a lot of people say, I have a negative net worth. I have more debt than assets. And honestly, I think that's where most people start. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
That's where I started.
Like, I had student loans when I first started, and I didn't pay off my student loans till like 8 years into my investing career, I think, because I
paid mine off like 6 months ago.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yes, right?
Yes.
Because like I was earning more money in interest in my investments than it would to pay off. So that is one calculation you could do. It's like if you have 100, let's just say 100 grand in student debt, like if you're going to put that towards your, 4 or 5% student loan, that's fine. But if you can earn 8 or 9% on a rental property on that, invest and earn the 8 or 9% and then pay off the minimum amount. So that's one thing. The other part of it, though, is like negative net worth is fine. Negative savings rate is not fine. I think like if you're in a point where you are spending more than you are earning, you have building blocks of financial literacy and responsibility to work on. Yeah. And I understand that people get into that period sometimes to no fault of their own. Sometimes you make a mistake. Who knows? But if you're in that situation, you're not in a good place to invest. I don't believe. I think you need to fix that first, because otherwise you're just compounding your risk and it's just not worth it.
If you don't have an emergency fund for your own life, you definitely shouldn't be trying to invest and not having an emergency fund for your real estate.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Because they'll both call due at the same time. That's just like just Murphy's Law.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And like, I don't know, sometimes when I first bought a property, I put aside some money for maintenance and, maybe something breaks, you just get bad luck. And then you have to tap into your personal finances. You got to bring a little bit more money to the table. And I'm not saying like huge amounts, but like if you didn't have that and your personal finances are sort of, walking a tightrope here, paper thin, it's just too much risk. It's not worth it.
if you're in a position, this is what I tell, because what I find is people use this as an excuse because they're scared to start.
Yeah.
Most people know that they're ready and they're making excuses. But I would say, look, if you are struggling to pay your own bills and you're struggling to make ends meet, you probably shouldn't go borrow money to buy property. But if you've got an emergency fund, you've got some money in savings, and you've got a semi-decent credit score, even if you've got other debt that you're working on, I would just do that calculation Dave talked about. Like high interest debt, work on paying that off first. If you got something at, 15 to 30% interest, pay that sucker off before you go investing. But if you've got, normal debt, single digit debt, then I would look at what's my typical cash on cash return for a real estate investment. And if that cash on cash return for the investment is higher than the debt you have, go invest and use that money to pay off your debt. Arbitrage that debt, baby.
Exactly.
Totally.
That's potentially the way out when you don't have a lot of money is to get something that earns more slowly. But we've been talking a lot about compound interest and the compound effect. The negative part of that works real well against you when you do it. If you don't do that first fix because you don't have $7,500 for the plumbing issue, now it's a $15,000 issue. Oh wait, now your HVAC broke. You can't get out of it. So just as we, say real estate can be great for compounding forward, it can go backward real quick. So can your finances.
I often tell the story of the best credit repair hack I ever heard. Because when I first got started, a lot of people don't know this. I didn't have great credit. And I worked with a credit repair company to try to help me get my credit back. And they were like, you know what you could do to get your score where it needs to be? You could pay off some of this crap.
What a hack.
What a hack.
Yeah.
Worked like a charm. That's the first thing I had to do was I had to pay off this outstanding debt that I had. Funny enough, the outstanding debt that I had to pay was a debt that an old landlord had put on me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It was a full circle moment.
Full circle.
That's
full
really
circle.
appropriate. Well, this has been a great conversation into sort of the lifestyle side of it. And Henry, thank you for raising that question about financial preparedness. So we've really covered it all, but there's one more topic we cannot get away from. We're talking about when to invest, and everyone wants to talk about timing the market. Is it a good time to invest? If does that even exist in real estate?
If you've stuck around till the end, boy, are you in for a treat, because the data deli himself, the man who looks at real estate numbers for a living, is going to tell us exactly when we should jump in this market because he has it timed perfectly.
June 24th.
Mark it on your calendar. Bye.
February 31st.
Oh my God. No, I please don't take that seriously, anyone. I just made up a particular number. I never know. But no, I made a social media post about this yesterday because I was just thinking about all of the objections, either friends or family or people I've heard about buying real estate since I started 15 years ago. And it was like, in 2010, it was like, oh my God, the market is literally crashing. And it was. And it was still a good time to buy. In 2013, people were like, oh, it's bottomed out, or like prices have been down for 4 or 5 years. Like, is now a good time to buy? Then as soon as prices started going up, people were already calling for another crash. Then in 2018, interest rates were going up and people were calling for another crash. Then we had COVID. Then we had this rate hike cycle. And it just feels like to a certain subset of people, it's never the right time. And then to be fair, on the other side, there are people who are like overly confident and say that it's always a great time to buy real estate. And so, Jonathan, let's start with you. Like, how do you think about market timing?
Well, I think you should always be looking, but I don't think that means that the deals are there. You have to, again, that goes back to us talking about reps. To me, I'm always looking, and I'm looking at different assets, and I'm trying to figure out what I like. And I never stop looking because I love real estate. But I think it goes into, when somebody says to me, oh, I'm concerned the rates are high. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, when do you think they're going to come down? What crystal ball do you have that I don't have? Because you may think they're going to come down in 6 months and they may not come down. And historically, rates are fine. So it's just like where are we in the cycle? And of course, then you have seller finance where you can adjust, you can, play terms versus price. And there's so many different things in real estate. So I think that most people, as Henry was saying before, just use it because they're stuck and they're scared to do it. Because if you're just going on, we've had lots of people, they're like, oh, well, the lender said it's going to be 6.5 and I'm only going to do it if it's 6.25. And you're like, you know how much it's going to cost you a month over 30 years? It's like $11. Relax.
Yeah, you're right.
But that's an excuse mechanism for not having enough confidence and not understanding
That's true.
What's a good deal. And this doesn't really matter. If it's a great deal, I just call my lender when I'm ready. What's the rate? Great. Let's go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I know it's it's not like I'm going to be surprised and it's 6 points higher. It's just the deal's good. I like the asset and I'm an asset hunter. So
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The whole game of being an investor is just resource allocation. Like it's not, I think the whole thing is like, compared to what, right? People are like, I'm not going to invest in real estate. Okay, fine. What are you going to do with your money? Is it a better option or a worse option? Like it sounds overly simplistic, but that's it, right? Is it better to keep your money in cash? Sometimes it is. Like, sometimes it's not. But I totally agree with the sentiment of always be looking.
Yeah, man. Two best times to buy a property are yesterday and today, right?
Yeah.
Like historically, can you look back and say, yeah, that was a bad time to buy property? Yeah, like, 2000 and early 2008, like late 2007. Sure, some people are like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have bought then. But like no one could time that. And for people like us who are deal hunters, right? Like I'm buying typically at a bigger discount than a traditional market crash would indicate.
Yeah.
Like if the market drops 20 to 30%, I typically buy at between 40 and 60 cents on the dollar, which means even if the market comes down 20%, I should still be right side up, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're looking for deals. In this particular sense, we're not talking about the normal family going to buy their home to live in. And even if it's that, if you're a normal family buying your home to live in, you're just stay there a little longer and the market will rebound.
Exactly.
Right? Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's kind of some of the considerations that I've been thinking about in my own portfolio recently is like, right now I'm probably going to make more conservative investments than I would have, a couple of years ago. I'm not going to take as big swings because you can't count on that. Just, it was like 3% appreciation a month, but when it was in
nuts in 2020.
It's not that, but like, I still think real estate is just a better place to put my money than in cash right now. I've been very open on this podcast. I have some fear about stock valuations right now. And so I think, real estate is a good place to put your money. And honestly, something that drives me kind of nuts is people comparing returns between now and a previous period. It is totally irrelevant. It couldn't matter less. What matters is what you could do with your money now versus other asset classes. Like that's the only calculation that matters. And to me, real estate is still the primarily important part of that for my portfolio. I put money elsewhere, but like it is still, to me, the thing that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, just it's just a value add aspect. You can't value add a stock. You have no input on a stock. You can't fix it up and you can't just let a stock sit there and it will just improve in value because
I bet some people wish they could right now.
Right. I mean, like what if the CEO does something crazy and then it goes down or somebody just says something in the news and a stock goes down? It's not even real. Real estate, nothing happens. It just goes up generally. If you just do nothing, it's going to go up generally in America, unless you just bought super high. But I mean, even if you just buy land's going to increase in value or it's going to have alternative uses. It's, buy real estate and wait. But even if you don't want to wait that long, if you look at the cycle since the pandemic, when people were like, oh, I don't know, it's a crazy time. It was crazy. I have people who are up $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 on their value because they bought in the beginning of 2020 and other people bought later. They're still up, but they're up less.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to keep your eye on the market all the time and look at stuff.
And you just also have to zoom out, right? Because let's think about it. In the history of America and normal people being able to buy real estate, people have bought real estate and made money in every single real estate market at every point in the cycle. Now, people have also lost money doing all those things. But if we study the ways to success and we are cautious, it's always a good time to invest because of what you said, Jonathan. If you hold on to it long enough, you'll look like a frick-fracking genius to somebody.
Always.
Well, thank you guys so much. That's a good way to get out of this episode. Thank you, Henry, for closing us out here. Well, Jonathan and Henry, thank you. This was a lot of fun and a great conversation. I think hopefully this is really useful to our audience. I know it is daunting. Like I was scared when I first started.
You should be scared. You're supposed to be scared.
Yeah. That's part of it, but it's also risk. With risk comes reward, and so that's
do it
kind of
anyway.
the idea. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it, and thank everyone who's listening right now for being a part of the BiggerPockets community. We appreciate all of you, and we'll see you for the next episode of the BiggerPockets podcast in just a couple of days.